Hello, this message is for members of the Burnsville, Minnesota City Council. My name is Paul B. I'm homeless, and I'm the host of the Homeless Consultant channel. I have spoken before the City Council twice. Once about 6 or 7 years ago, and once about 3 or 4 years ago. Both times I was there, this City Council treated me with respect and dignity. You were very nice, you were very kind. I am grateful to this day. It was a good experience. And I feel like, just based on that at least, that the people of Burnsville are well served by at least the city councils in place at that time. However, one of the things I talked to you about has never been addressed. And there's another issue that I need to raise with you. The reason is because as of today, this car is officially dead. Which means I no longer have a job, which is 20 miles away. Which means you can infer the obvious. So I'm just doing some cleanup here, getting my affairs settled, and these two things I have been wanting to talk to you about. I wish I had the time to go and talk to you in person, but I don't. The first thing is this. 6 or 7 years ago when I came before you, I remember having two things I said. I think there were three, but two I remember. One was to give well-deserved praise to your police department in Burnsville. 6, 7 years later, that still stands. You have a great police department. I am grateful, and I sure hope the people of Burnsville are grateful as well. Because where I came from in New Brighton that made me homeless, they didn't have a good police department. One of the main reasons I've been homeless all these years. I hope the people of Burnsville appreciate, and I hope they let those police officers know how important it is that they are so good in this community. The other thing I talked to you about, though, was to point out that the timing of the lights, because Burnsville is set up in such a grid pattern where you have intersections every block, for what it's worth, and almost every one of them has a stoplight. And what I said was, you have to stop at every stoplight, even if you're on the main road, and that doesn't make any sense. You should be, if you're going the speed limit, obeying the law, you should be able to just sail down the main road. It's the people who are not on the main road who are going to have to wait a bit. It just makes sense. And I pointed that out to you. And I don't know if it's because this was coming from a homeless person or if there's some bureaucratic reason for it. I don't know. But it hasn't been addressed. In 6 years, nothing has changed. When you take off at a stoplight and you accelerate normally and you get up to the speed limit, the law, and you obey that law, there is no excuse on a main road where you have cars all around you, and at these intersections you've just got a couple cars sitting there. There's no excuse for you having to slam on your brakes and stopping at the next light, and then do it again and stop at the next light. I have film of me, back when my camera worked, of me driving through Burnsville hitting as many as 12 lights in a row. Bam! 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 Going down 42 and then down 5. This puts a tremendous amount of wear and tear on people's vehicles. The brakes. In my case, with a manual transmission, the clutch, the transmission, the suspension. I mean, it put the cooling system, for that matter, because you're not just moving and getting airflow. It puts tremendous wear and tear on your cars. I did an 8-part series on junk science, something that I've been an expert on for 30 years. So I'm not going to go off into the climate change fiasco. But it seems to me like people in Minnesota believe this. If you believe this, why are you allowing all these cars to repeatedly stop and sit there and burn fossil fuels? Especially when they cost $5 a gallon. I don't understand. I brought it up 6 or 7 years ago. Before my SSD drive died on this computer about 3 or 4 months ago, I was doing calculations, coming up with just estimates. I mean, obviously they're estimates. But because I sit all the time, I count cars, I can see what's going on. I have a better sense of what's going on in this town than probably anybody in this town, because I'm sitting there observing all these years. The calculations I was coming up with was, I can't remember exactly, but it was somewhere around, my estimate was that it was probably around $5 million every year in vehicle maintenance and repairs that were directly attributable just to those stoplights. And if that seems like a large number, then I'll ask you to do something else. Sit down sometime, go watch some street lights and put a stopwatch how long they are. And then ask yourself, how many stoplights or count them when you go to work. And then do some math and ask yourself, now that medical science has me living all these extra years, I wonder how much time I spend sitting at stoplights. You can do the math yourself, and you're going to come up with an answer of about 6 months of this extra long life you have sitting at stoplights. It doesn't have to be that way. What's the point of living longer if you spend all that extra time sitting at stoplights, dealing with modern technology, waiting for the Windows cursor? What's the point of living longer if that's how it's being occupied? Waiting at the DMV in line? Folks, the problems with my car right now, the clutch is dead. The transmission is probably dead. Ball joint, broken. Drive shaft, broken. CV axle, bad. Every one of those wears out as a consequence of starting and stopping your car repeatedly. My brakes, by the way, they aren't one of the reasons I'm stymied, but my brakes are bad too. All of these things are a consequence of having to start and stop your car over and over and over again, thousands of times. I urge you to consider what I told you 6 or 7 years ago. If you have a main road where I can be sitting here and there's 10 cars in front of me and 10 or 20 behind me, and there's cars on each side of me and over in the turn lane, and we're going down the road, and then at each intersection there's maybe 12 cars just sitting there, and there's 50 on this main road, and we're going the speed limit, which is rare because most people break the law in Minnesota, but if you're driving the speed limit, you should go sailing through each and every light on that main road. It's the people on the non-main roads who should have to wait. And yes, I understand that this is not an easy task. My first year of computer science in college, we were introduced to NP complete problems. And scheduling and the traffic light problem is a classic NP complete problem. I do understand that. All that means, though, is that there is no perfect way to schedule all the lights. I'm not asking you to do that. Schedule the lights on the main road so that when you accelerate normally and travel the speed limit, you go through every light. It's the other people who should be waiting because there aren't as many of them. The people of Burnsville will save millions of dollars in wear and tear on their vehicles. The people who actually believe in climate change can breathe a sigh of relief because we're saving the planet. We're not sitting there burning fossil fuels at every light. And people like me will not have their lives completely destroyed and set about preparing to die because their car was worn out by a pack of Burnsville lights. Not smoking, a pack of Burnsville lights. That's the first thing I had for you. The second thing I have is this. In the last year or so, there has been a skyrocketing increase in the number of these little kids whose parents buy them these expensive sports cars. From what I can tell, these kids probably haven't worked a day in their lives. If they have, they're still totally irresponsible. And in fact, their parents are failures. They failed to raise their children properly. These kids are detaching the catalytic converter and the muffler from their car so that when they drive down the road, their cars go... And then when they let off the gas and do that, the car backfires. Boom, 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 boom. I told you a moment ago that I have to sit around and observe what's going on all around me. I have lost track of how many times I have seen people, at the very least, absolutely startled by those backfires because they sound exactly like a shotgun. And in the world we're in today, I think everybody's fearful of another mass shooting. I have seen people drop to the ground. I have seen people tell the person they're with, yell at them, say, "Get down!" because that car is backfiring. And I don't mean just backfiring once. I'm talking about boom, 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 sounding like an automatic weapon. And these little kids just drive around in circles. I'll see the same car go by every 5 minutes or so. They have no purpose to their existence whatsoever. They're doing nothing with their lives. I can hear them miles away. I can hear them way down to the highway. And I'm not even talking about the motorcycles. The motorcycles are horrific. These are the cars. These parents just gave these little kids expensive cars and allow them to go out and pollute the environment with that noise for hours every single night, driving all through Burnsville. Again, I'm just doing rough calculations and numbers, Google Maps and such. By my calculations, one of these little kids is disturbing the peace and the domestic tranquility. They are effectively invading the homes of 10, 20, 30,000 Burnsville residents every night. That's one of them. And there's more than a dozen of these kids out there. I would dare say there's a lot more. There's probably about 20 of them. The little red car with the ridiculous looking white stripe, the two black cars, the gray silver one, the pickup trucks. I know them when I see them. They're ridiculous. They look like clown cars. But the kids think they're cool, and their parents didn't teach them any better. Their parents are failures. What their parents could have done was say, instead of spending this $30,000 on this sports car for you to go out and disturb the peace all around your community, we're going to take you out with this money and we're going to show you and demonstrate to you how to show compassion for other people who are in need. And we're going to try to raise our children to grow up so that for the next 40, 50, 60 years while you're alive, instead of you being a menace to society, which is what they are now and what they will be for the next 60 years, maybe this kid will end up being someone who actually does some good in this world and leaves this world a better place than they found it. But that's not happening with these kids, and their parents don't seem to care. Their parents should be held accountable as well. When I was in high school, if anyone in my high school did something like that and had a car that made that kind of noise, they would pull out of their garage, and before they got to the end of the first block, there would be red and blue rollers in their rearview mirror. And they wouldn't do it again. I promise you, they wouldn't do it again. And their parents would get a good talking to from the police. You have a great police department here, but for some reason, nobody is instructing them to do something about this. I'm just a homeless guy who's trying to work on things that have some hope of maybe getting me out of this. Like I said, I don't watch TV. I don't goof off. I don't vegetate. When I'm on this computer, I'm doing something productive. And these kids are out there interrupting me, just like the reason I became homeless from my home in New Brighton. And nobody's doing anything about it. And if you don't believe me, then go ask some questions around town. Or if people in Burnsville happen to run across this video and watch it, give a phone call to the city council. Send them an email. Let them know what you think about it. Do you like being inside your home, your palace, your castle, and having something that loud just going by for the sole sake because these kids want to inject themselves into your home and their home and their home and their home and the other thousands of homes that they drive past. Their goal is to influence other people. And their parents should be held accountable. When I lost my home because of how my neighbors were terrorizing and torturing me with noise and violence, a home invasion from all directions, and I still have what amounts to post-traumatic stress disorder from that, where I was just laying curled up in the fetal position. I was terrified to go to my own home at the end of that. I was just terrified to go to my own home, and nobody would do anything about it. Police, these useless, absolutely useless, the worst bar association I've seen anywhere in this country, just pathetic, did nothing to help me. A guy who had 7,000 hours of recordings of this violence being injected in my home, and they would do nothing to help me. And here's what I get. Because of that, and because I'm not a vegetable, I ended up studying noise and health. I'm not going to say I became one of the great experts on it like I am in other things, like junk science. That I'm one of the experts in the world on. Not so much here, but I learned a lot, and I had a website that I think was the best website on noise and health on the web. I lost it, like I've lost everything else. Couldn't afford to keep it. There are academic journals on the topic of noise and health. You seem to think that noise is a problem because you spent millions of dollars on these noise walls, didn't you? Along the highway, so that people in their homes would not have noise injected into their homes. Apparently there's something about noise that isn't good. But when I was documenting what was going on in my home, I learned all about measuring noise. I'm telling you right now, those vehicles out there, they are at the same decibel level of jackhammers and jet engines. Members of the Burnsville City Council, if I drove this rusted out car, looking as disheveled as I am, with all this junk in the car, obviously homeless, and I had a jet engine on top, not hurting anybody, just making some noise, would I get pulled over or not? Are these kids who were raised so poorly the kids of parents in Burnsville who might have a little power and clout to prevent the city from stopping them? Look a few videos back on the plane crash of Brittany Infranger in Idaho. How that very kind of thing happening in the government over there killed that girl, that pilot. I'm here to tell you something right now. Not only is this disturbing the peace of everyone in Burnsville for no reason, just so that a bunch of little kids can act like immature monsters while their parents do nothing about it and the city does nothing about it. They also, not all the time, but they will race each other. I saw, and I had my audio recorder right here, and I didn't have it on. I saw two of those cars racing. They were going to have to run a red light, so they both laid on their horns, both of them, to try to warn people. No red and blue rollers in sight. And yet when I'm sleeping in this car at 3 in the morning, what do I get? Can I see your ID, please? Apparently, a homeless person sleeping between shifts at work is a threat, but these little kids, these immature little kids with these ridiculously powerful cars racing and running red lights isn't a problem? I want to tell you something right now, and I want it on record. In this regard, I'm glad this is a video on YouTube. Those kids are going to kill somebody if they're not stopped. They will kill somebody. And I know what I'm talking about. When I went before the New Brighton City Council twice about my noise problem, and they did absolutely nothing. They didn't even care. They were not at all like the Burnsville City Council. I mean, they were friendly enough and nice. The mayor wasn't. The mayor was just grumpy old monster, but the others were pretty nice, but they didn't do anything. Kind of like the stoplights. Nothing was done about. I told that city council, if you continue to allow the police to do absolutely nothing but blame the victim when they call the police for help to enforce the laws that you created, noise ordinances, you created them, and the police will enforce them for you when somebody's bothering you at home, and they'll do it for your sister, and they'll do it for your friends, but they won't do it for me. If you keep allowing the police to pick and choose who they're going to help, somebody is going to die. And that's what I told them. And if you dig through the videos of New Brighton's city council meetings, you're going to find me telling them that. If you want to find them, I recommend that you look up when Todd Stevens was murdered by his neighbor, and just go back about 6 months. Because it was 6 months after I told the city council this that Todd Stevens was murdered by his neighbor in New Brighton. He was shot dead by his neighbor, who had been torturing and tormenting him and his girlfriend for years. The neighbor also shot his girlfriend. And as she was being taken to the ambulance, the news media's out there, Care 11, the ones who have completely ignored my story for 7 years, won't touch it. Care 11 was there filming this girl as she was shouting and screaming at the police. We called you for help. We begged you for help, and you didn't help. We told you this was going to happen, and you didn't do anything. As her boyfriend lay there dead, and she was shot. I told the city council that was going to happen, and it would be the police department's fault. I'm telling you right now, these kids are going to kill somebody. It might even be you, or someone you love. It might be somebody who the state of Minnesota doesn't care about whether they live or die. It might be me who gets killed. Or it might be a school bus full of kids. Or like this Senate Minority Leader, Democrat in Wisconsin, who went for a nice drive while she's on the phone the day after getting eye surgery, and she ended up killing a young mother and her daughter, and she'll probably never be held accountable for it because she's a Democrat, and they don't get held accountable for anything, do they? Such as setting up this fake social service system in Minnesota, which is nothing but a money pit for the tax dollars of people like you who get sucked into it and keep pumping your money into it, when social services leaves people like me out to suffer, starve, and die. Off camera, you see. That's what my channel documents, by the way. In case you were only watching Care 11 and you thought that the state of Minnesota does something for its 20,000 homeless people. It doesn't. Someone's going to die if you don't stop those kids from racing those cars around. It's inexcusable that they've been making this much noise for this long and nobody has stopped them yet. When I was a kid, I could never have even dreamt of trying to get away with something like that. And here you've got somewhere between 12 and 20 cars that are every single night out there just, if you don't believe me, go to Chick-fil-A any night you want. Some nights they go to a different part of town, but pretty much any night. Go on 42, go to Chick-fil-A, and just sit in the parking lot at Starbucks. Get a $5 coffee, and go sit in the parking lot and just listen. Then you'll know what I mean. Those are my suggestions to you. I don't know why I'm offering it to you, because by giving you these things, I'm trying to save the people of Burnsville money I'm trying to stop their cars from being destroyed, and I'm trying to save lives. And these are the very people who don't care whether I live or die. The very people who gawk at me and make selfies of themselves in front of me when I'm sleeping in my car and send their children out to make selfies with the homeless guy in the background. The very people who, these Somali kids out there, one of the videos I had before my SSD died, showing the Somali kids making a selfie with all of them standing there, and I had my good camera this time. I got great clear photo of them looking back and laughing and pointing at me making a selfie. How Americans don't take care of their own citizens, but they give those people everything. Free homes, free cars, free phones, everything but a job. And the only thing I ever asked for was a job. My job of 6 years is now gone because the car's dead. And I will follow because nobody in this state cares whether I live or die. I hope you'll use my suggestions to improve the quality of life and the length of life of the people of Burnsville. Fix those lights. Make them reasonable and rational. And stop those kids from racing down the road with those noisy cars that are as loud as a jet engine. And for God's sakes, find their parents and hold them accountable for their unbelievable failure to raise their children. Those kids, if they'd been raised properly, they would have been out looking for opportunities to help people who are in need at night. And look what they're doing instead. That's all I have to say. I wish you the best.